There's that word again. You need to leave that in your mind. The occupation that started in 1967 is morally and politically unsustainable and must end. Now, for those of you that don't know, that's when Israel regained Jerusalem. That was the Six-Day War, okay? Which was prophetically told in the Old Testament that not only would they gather into the land, but they would have Jerusalem as their capital.
Yeah.
Now let me just say something real quickly when I'm thinking about it. All the passages are yet to be fulfilled with Israel. What we're seeing right now as Israel is not the fullness of what will happen. Most of that will not happen to the millennium. But we're seeing some. Basically, there will be two influx of regatherings. There's going to be one in unbelief, and then there's going to be one in belief. And that will happen, obviously, after Armageddon. But anyway, he went on to say, the Palestinians have a legitimate right to the establishment of an independent and viable state of their own. Now, if you listen to any news, you read any news, or you pay attention to it, almost 99.9% of the world system says and agrees with that statement. If you don't agree with that, well then you're a minority, but at the same time, you're biblical. Okay? Now, let me just say something that's going to be very important. I want you to listen to this quote. Okay? Very important to listen to this quote. Make the lie big. Make it simple. Keep saying it, and eventually they will believe it. Anybody have an idea who said that? Obama. Don't go tell anybody who said that, okay? No, it wasn't Obama. It was Adolf Hitler. Oh man, you don't even want me to get me started on that one. Listen to what he said in 1939. He says, this is Adolf Hitler speaking, I shall give a propagandist reason for starting a war. Never mind whether it is plausible or not. The victor will not be asked afterwards whether he told the truth or not. In starting and waging a war, it is not right that matters, but victory. Now that's very important for you to understand, because the issue at hand here is this whole concept of this so-called Palestinian state. Now, and before I go into the real good part of this, I need to stop here, and you've got to really pay attention to these next few slides. It's going to be very crucial you listen to this. There is this big lie that's been going around. It's been going around and going around, and after a while, people think it's true. It's just like Hitler said, you say it long enough and keep repeating it, after a while, people are going to believe it. Well, let me just say something to you about this, and this is going to be very important. Israel became a nation in 1312 BC. That's 2,000 years before Islam showed up. Of course, Muhammad showed up around 600 AD. So, literally 2,000 years before there was an Islamic religion, Israel was the nation rooted there in the city of David. Okay? Now, 726 years later, in 586 BCE, the first ancient Jews in the land of Israel were overthrown, and the Israelis' first temple, the Jewish temple, was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. And all of you have read the book of Daniel. You remember the story. That all took place. Jeremiah prophesied and warned Israel if they would not turn from their idolatry and their sin, they would be overthrown, etc., etc. They continued in their sin over and over again. Prophets came and warned. Eventually, God said, okay, I've had it. And so he said, I'm going to send you my servant, Nebuchadnezzar, and he's going to demolish your land. And he's going to scatter you all over the world. Well, obviously there were thousands of Jews that were killed and expelled. Some of them were taken as slaves to Iraq. But many of them were allowed to remain. And that's why you read, for example, the book of Nehemiah, the book of Ezra, where they were trying to rebuild Jerusalem, because there were a large number of people still living there. These Jews, along with their descendants and other Jews who would resettle over the next 500 years, rebuild the nation of Israel, also the second temple of Jerusalem, upon the Temple Mount that was bought by King David. And of course, the claim now of the Palestinians that the Jews just kind of appeared on the land just right after the Holocaust is absolutely preposterous. It's totally, absolutely insane. But see, here's what's happened. Now, these people are being taught that they're living in the Palestinian, that somehow the Jews came and somehow, tried to, take over their land. It was never their land. Now, let me just share with you some interesting things. I want you, in the next few questions I ask you, to think about this. Name at least one so-called Palestinian leader before Yasser Arafat. Name him. You can't. Because there wasn't one. Exactly. There wasn't one. And it wasn't until after the 6-Day War in 1967 that Yasser Arafat started claiming, we're the Palestinians. Well, when was Palestine founded? And by whom? Question number 2. Where were its borders? If there's a Palestinian state, what's its borders? Number 3, what was its capital? If there was a Palestinian state, there had to be a capital, and what was its capital? Nothing in history ever talks about a capital city of this so-called Palestinian state. What were its major cities? Like every other area, they had to have some kind of major cities. Name a few of them. You can't, because it never existed. Number 5, what constituted the basis of its economy? And what was the form of government that it used? I mean, if this Palestinian state existed, what was the name of its currency? There's got to be some kind of evidence of the currency. Where's the currency at? All those questions cannot be answered because, guess what? There never was a Palestinian state. That never existed. The Jewish people have one of the most legitimate birth certificates of all the nations in the world. Amen. Because every single time they start doing digs in Israel, they start documenting that Jews were living there for 3,000 years. Every single time they start, and it was so funny, about 2 years ago, they really got on, the Palestinians really got us, there was never even a temple. Then they started digging around the Temple Mount. They found all the evidence of major proof there was a temple. Matter of fact, they even had a lot of the cornerstone, where all where they would get up on top of the temple site and the priest would blow the horn, and he had all this stuff. It had been laying there for 2,000 years. Well, you look at the coins, the pottery, they constantly are digging up the cities, they're digging up just all kinds of ancient Hebrew text. It's everywhere. All I got to do is just get a shovel and start digging, you'll find it. It's so easily documented. Now, while other people groups have passed through this area, there is no mistaking the fact that Jews have always had a continual presence in the land of Israel for 3,000 years. Now, the enemies of Israel are the same enemies of Christianity, which are also the same enemies of America and the enemies of the freedom that you and I have. So guess what? The people that don't want them around don't want us around. So maybe you need to start thinking anybody that hates them, hating us, maybe we ought not to be so against Israel. Maybe we ought to be thinking, hey, we need to kind of be buddies here. And that's been the case it's been. Now, really what we're witnessing right now is an all-out attack against the trustworthiness of the Word of God. And let me tell you something. If the enemy can prove God is a liar in this book, then the battle's over. But obviously, it's not even competition. Amen?